The case against Brian Koberger has garnered international attention for several reasons. One of them being the mystery and the questions surrounding the investigation and the actual evidence against Brian Koberger. So for anyone who wants to know the direction in which this case is going, this is the moment that we've been waiting for. The answer to these motions are turning points in this case and where it's all decided coming up in these January 23rd and 24th hearings. The trial is just what's left over. Now, Judge Hippler is a by-the-books or deadline guy. And last night, 2 documents were dropped pretty late. And I'm going to explain to you in this video why this upcoming hearing is going to be partially sealed and partially open to the public. Also, it appears there's kind of like a partial Franks hearing going on as well. And even in the 0 hours surrounding these upcoming hearings, the defense calls an emergency hearing to, again, argue Brian Koberger's constitutional right to have the IGG portion of this hearing open to the public. So we got a lot to talk about, and we're going to try and keep it short and sweet, but I'm going to go over all of this in this video. But the one thing I want you to know before we get started is the motions that are being answered today. These motions are where the case is won. The trial is what the judge says is heard. And so the question that's left lingering in many people's minds right now is that if the judge rules fairly, will the prosecution's case be shredded? Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This video is part of a larger podcast where I cover the case against Brian Koberger, otherwise known as the Idaho 4 case. So I try to take a unique approach to covering this case. Oftentimes, I try to avoid labels. I don't want to be called a pro-burger. I don't want to be called a guilter. I want to be objectively in the middle. So we're going to talk about several things in this case. We're going to talk about DNA, and we're going to talk about the latest in the case. So just less than 12 hours before the January 23rd and 24th hearings, which determined the evidence, we saw several documents dropped. We also saw in 24 hours preceding these hearings 2 kind of emergency hearings. According to these 0-hour documents that are dropped, the arrow that you see pointing here shows us that Brian Koberger's supplemental list for witnesses is going to be sealed in this hearing. It also says that the IGG portion of this hearing is going to be sealed. Remind everybody that I am not a lawyer or a legal expert, but this next document says basically that the legal arguments are going to be public when it comes to the IGG. But even more interestingly, when I look at this document, just paraphrasing, it's kind of saying they're having a Franks hearing right now, but not having an official Franks hearing right now to conserve time. Essentially, the judge saying he's going to meet this deadline and this is how he's going to do it. So it should play out that if this does end up being evidence that is going to be admitted into court or a full-blown Franks hearing, he's going to unseal that portion of the case too. So I'm just going to play you a portion of what the judge actually said.
At the end of the day, regardless of the outcome, the likelihood is everything will be unsealed. And before then, as soon as it can be done in a way that protects the case and the jury pool, which is the parties' rights, both parties' rights to a fair trial is paramount, as is the public's right to know. But I also have to weigh that against the ability to have a fair trial by getting a jury panel that has not been tainted by the publication of widespread publication of evidence that may not be admissible at trial. At the end of the day, regardless of the outcome, the likelihood is everything will be unsealed. And before then, as soon as it can be done in a way that protects the case and the jury pool, which is the parties' rights, both parties' rights to a fair trial is paramount, as is the public's right to know. But I also have to weigh that against the ability to have a fair trial by getting a jury panel that has not been tainted by the publication of widespread publication of evidence that may not be admissible at trial. So it's a bit of a narrow path for the court to have to tread, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate that that calculus isn't always in the direction that one would hope, but I am doing my best to make that calculus in a way to ensure the rights of the parties and to ensure a fair trial, and that we can do that as quickly as possible. All right. So I will issue an order forthwith, and tomorrow we will come forward with public hearings just as soon as we can. Further, if after hearing that evidence I determine it doesn't need to be protected, I will order a transcript be prepared, and I will order that that be produced. But in the meantime, I think I need to take this course, so I appreciate that. Right. Thank you.
So what led to Brian Kohlberger. But here's the interesting thing, an interview back in October of 2023, where Christy Gonzalez very clearly says that on the 13th of December, they were swirling around Brian Kohlberger's name.
We're going to,
And they
we
did.
know.
That was the only thing that I left that day when we met with them. It was like, I believe it was December 13th. And
it made a big impact on you.
And that was right around the time that they were swirling his name around. And he said, 100%, this will be solved. And I was like, that's all I need to know.
So if they didn't have the genetic testing until the 19th, then they found him some other way. There's lots of rumors about how they could have done that. But here's the thing is it's hard to speculate on that. We just don't have enough information to understand exactly how they got to Brian. They don't want us to know until trial. What we should be doing is looking at what the defense is talking about. And the defense is talking about.
What I find absolutely fascinating about the defense's positioning is that early on and all the way up until December of 2024, the defense claimed that in all open hearings that the prosecution has not showed how they got to Brian Kohlberger. And then all of a sudden, the tone changed. Before, in December of 2024, starting then, we heard Ann Taylor and Jay Logston put into writing that investigators found Brian Kohlberger via investigative genetic genealogy. And at the end of the day, it just feels like it's time to open this trial up, in my opinion. It's his right, and they can't deny it to him any longer because there are just a few other mysteries lingering.
Is looking at what the defense is talking about. And the defense is talking about these unknown sources of male DNA. I was watching Miss Potts the other day, and she was bringing up a couple of line items mentioned in Bicka Barlow's declaration for the defense. And in Bicka Barlow's declaration, she talks about her seeing multiple unknown DNA profiles uploaded to CODIS. She requested the unknown DNA profiles for the investigators so she could complete her discovery, and she was denied them. She was told they didn't have them. But she pushes back on that, saying, you can't erase what's in CODIS. You uploaded something. We want that something.
In one of the filings by Jay Logston, he says that by December 17, 2022, lab analysis were aware of 2 additional male DNAs within the house where the deceased were located and another unknown male DNA on a glove found outside the residence on November 20th, 2022. You know that in the May 30th hearings, Ashley Jennings from the prosecution answered by saying that the request for the defense further testing was done on the 3 DNAs, as well as facilitated additional DNA trace evidence to be examined at the request. So I guess where this leaves me is, it just kind of makes me wonder if the scope of all these requests had been fulfilled. Is that why Jay Logston in this paperwork filed in December is saying that there are alternative suspects? Because I mean, unknown DNA would be the first alternative suspect for me if I were the defense.
Since they're hitting so hard on this, when you see that language of alternative suspects, this is, to me, what I think they might be talking about. It makes me kind of go back to BF on the first floor. What if BF did see something? Look, if I were Ann Taylor, if I were pursuing the defense of Brian Kohlberger, I would 100% look into these unknown DNAs. It would be a primary source of my defense. Let me show you one more article. So I don't read an article like this with intention of criticizing the survivors. I read an article like this instead to explain the confusion that's been going on in this case. So I'm going to get right into it, and I'm going to leave you with more questions than you had before you clicked on this video. So let's get right into it. This article says, surviving Idaho roommate Bethany Funk fights having to testify at Brian Kohlberger's trial as part of his defense. One of the 2 housemates, I'm going to pull this up so you could see it as I read. One of the 2 housemates who survived the brutal slayings that claimed the lives of 4 University of Idaho students is fighting a subpoena that would force her to testify as part of murder suspect Brian Kohlberger's defense. Bethany Funk, and from here on after, I'm going to call her BF. 21, filed a motion to dismiss a subpoena that Kohlberger's attorneys filed to the district court in Washoe County, Nevada, where she's from, on Friday, according to the court records. Kohlberger's attorneys argued that the housemate's testimony is key to the trial and could clear the murder charges levied against their client. BF has information that is material to the charges against Mr. Kohlberger. Portions of that information Ms. Funk has is exculpatory to the defendant, Attorney Richard Batanti wrote in an affidavit. So, I mean, there are a few things to break down this article. There's actually a couple pieces of misreporting in it, but instead of breaking down the article, I'm just going to say this is kind of where the defense was at in these preliminary hearings. I want to show you something else, though. I'm going to my YouTube page. So this post reads, so you can see up here I wrote, is this what Batanti was talking about when he subpoenaed BF? So this quote says, I'm quoting from one other poster here about what Stacey Chapin had said on November 17th interview. Apparently she got this information from one of the young guys who was called to the house before Ellie arrived. She said, BF said, she heard loud male voices, Ethan's being one. There was a lot of yelling with guys. Murphy was heard barking. Sounds like furniture getting knocked around. Then a loud thud. After the thud, it appeared to be silent. BF thought it was drunk frat guys arguing and just roughhousing, but she did not say she was scared. And just to further back that up, I have the receipts right here where that came from. Warning label Nina provided me with it. Until the day comes that BF and DM can actually tell their stories to us, we have to just wait. We can make all sorts of speculation what would cause somebody to wait 8 hours. Their story is so important. One thing I've heard is that 911 call indicates something in this crime, might embody something that explains why the house is the target. 911 call is very odd. The timing is odd. It wasn't made by one of the surviving roommates, and it would clear up a lot of confusion to release the 911 call, but they don't.
So if we look at this case like it's a house of cards, and we're looking at possibly having a lot of these things unsealed, well, maybe we're going to find out who's actually being protected now. Is it Brian Kohlberger, or is it the investigators and their techniques? Because at the end of the day, the real questions have now reached the desk of Judge Hippler. Is this going to turn into a Franks hearing? Does he need to make the decision, walk or not? Because with a case that's been gagged, sealed, and redacted, we are just juggling so many secrets. Too many people perceive misconduct through the court filings and the mixed narratives and messaging. There is corruption, or if the jury or the judge perceive corruption, it will only be overcome by a smoking gun. Is there a smoking gun? Could there be more? Do they have someone or something that led to BK? Was there a weapon found? Did somebody see him other than DM? Was it BF? Was it the alleged DoorDash driver? Who? What? Did it have something to do with the 71 federal grand jury subpoenas that were handed over to the defense with no dates attached? If this is a deck of cards, they have to have an ace. They have to have a card that stands alone, is undisputable. And just going with this analogy of a house of cards when we're looking at the defense and the prosecution strategy, I would say the cards being shown to the public started when Corporal Payne took the stand talking about how he tracked and mapped Brian Kohlberger's cell phone. And then later we heard expert witness Cy Ray saying that Brian Kohlberger was nowhere near the scene of the crime from what the evidence that he's seen. And for everybody watching, our jaws nearly hit the floor when Ann Taylor turns to Corporal Payne on the stand and said, I'd like to show you these private text messages from FBI agent Nick Balance that you were working with. When she showed them to Corporal Payne, she said she does not want to have to admit these into evidence. FBI agent Nick Balance was working for the prosecution to build the case against Brian Kohlberger. How did Ann Taylor get FBI agent Nick Balance's text messages? She said they were FBI agent Nick Balance's personal text messages, and there was a group, so we can only assume that this investigator handed them over to the defense. But why? What would cause this FBI agent to secretly leak his text messages? So the bottom line is this moment is huge, and if what we're seeing is real, we actually could be seeing the case dismissed with nothing else to say. That dismissal would and could come fast and furious. Will it be dismissed? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
If you've made it this far into this video, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I had to say. I would love if you considered subscribing. I try to put videos out like this daily, and I'd love to have you be part of
my beautiful, amazing, loyal, blessed, and wonderful true crime community. Have a good day, and thank you so much for watching.